welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm really excited to share this conversation with Kendall Wood. Kendall is a yoga therapist. We actually completed the same yoga therapy training out of Encinitas, California. Kendall specializes in yoga therapy for managing stress, alleviating chronic pain, and improving your quality of life. She offers private sessions, group classes, events, and she really provides a holistic approach to healing your body and mind. One reason I'm so excited to share this conversation is because Kendall is just as passionate as I am about yoga for mental health and really using it as a preventative and proactive tool to support our mental health wherever we are at in life. In this conversation, we talk about Kendall's experience working with veterans, first responders, trauma, and PTSD. We talk about how yoga helps us know and feel and sit with all of our emotions. We talk about the importance of anger and how to feel it, the importance of embracing all of who we are and the connection between authenticity and community, and how we can't feel shame about being multifaceted human beings who feel all different emotions and have all different sides of us, and the importance of having a space to share all the different parts of us. I really hope that you enjoy this one with Kendall. Kendall, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so one question I like to start with is, what is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
That is a good question. I think something I wish people knew about me is a lot of people just know me through the context of being their yoga teacher, but I like to expand that out and let people know that I am more than just a yoga teacher, So I have a variety of different hobbies. I love to rock climb. I love my cat. I love to read. I'm always seeking out new information. I love to learn. And in that context of being a yoga teacher, also, I am not perfect. I don't have everything figured out. And I think it's important to set the stage for that early on when I meet people of I am a yoga teacher. I have a lot of really great information and knowledge to share, but I am also a human being.
I love that. And I resonate with that. I think that people can attach labels and identities to us. We all do it to each other, and it helps us make sense of people and understand who they are, but we are all so much more than that and not one-dimensional and not one thing. And I do think it's helpful to remind people of that, because even unconsciously they can put us in boxes, and we want people to know that we're more than just one way they might see us. And we also are not perfect. I think that it can be easy, especially in the yoga world, to put people on pedestals. And I have experienced that with teachers in the past, and I've seen that happen with teachers in the past. And so I'm really big on making sure that people don't see me in that light. I want them to know that I'm not perfect at all.
Yes. Yep, I feel that.
Yeah. I got a tattoo that says imperfect, and it's on the back of my shoulder because I want people to see I'm not perfect.
I love that.
How did your journey with yoga start? What was that beginning like for you?
So I did yoga a little bit when I was younger. My mom went to a gym that offered yoga classes. And so when I was in my early teen years, I would occasionally go and take a yoga class while she was working out or something. But I was like by far the youngest person in the room and had no clue what I was doing. But I remember really liking it. Like it would be like candle lit and really like just a little bit warm and cozy. And I was like, oh, this is nice. Like, what is this about? But then it wasn't until after college, when I was in my early 20s, that I was going through a time period in my life that was pretty tumultuous. I was pretty burnt out, not sure what direction I wanted to take with my life, was working a variety of random jobs, mostly in the hospitality industry. I was doing event planning and I was managing a restaurant and also doing some office work during the day. It was just a pretty chaotic time. And in that time in my life, a friend of mine invited me to a yoga class. And she was like, hey, like I clean this yoga studio in exchange for free classes. Like you should come check it out. And just like leaving that class feeling like a weight was lifted was a big eye-opening moment for me of like, oh, there are ways I could be taking care of myself. I don't need to just be in this like crazy rat race, like clawing my way through life. I could actually maybe slow down and start taking care of myself more. And so that kind of just like lit something in me and I started going regularly and it was a big lifestyle change for me. I went from like working in the nightlife industry and like drinking a lot and being up until 3 and 4 in the morning all the time to like, maybe I'll just go to a yoga class and just go straight to bed. That could be nice. And just kind of led me to making some healthier choices. And not only did I start feeling more physically fit, but I stopped having so much anxiety. I stopped having panic attacks. I started to like sleep better. And when I started seeing all of those like more mental health benefits of the practice, I was like, whoa, this is something more than what I thought it was. Like, I need to learn more about this. And that was when I became a yoga teacher myself.
It shows up time and time again that yoga or any spiritual practice finds us at the time that we really need it. And what was coming up for me when you were talking is that there's so many people who I work with who are afraid of making changes because they're afraid that people in their life won't understand or they'll outgrow people or their lifestyle changes will require dynamics to shift. So I'm curious if that started to happen in your life as you started to change. You're no longer going out and drinking at 3 a.m. You're taking a yoga class and going to bed. Did that change the relationships in your life? And what was that like for you?
Yeah, it definitely did. And that's a challenging part of the journey of changing. It's like not only changing yourself, but realizing that your whole life might need to be restructured. And that was a big reason why I moved to San Diego. I was living in Seattle at the time. I'm now based in San Diego. But it got to a point where I felt like if I didn't leave Seattle, I was not going to really be able to make those lifestyle changes that I wanted if I was continuing to live and work in the same environment with the same people and places that I um, associated with those like habits that weren't as healthy for me. And so that was when I moved, was I was like, I want to like stop partying so much. I want to create a healthier, more outdoorsy, adventurous friend group. I want to go somewhere where the weather is nice year round and I can get outside. And San Diego was just like felt like the right place.
I had a similar experience, but funny enough, mine was in San Diego. I moved there for the yoga therapy program at Soul of Yoga that we both did. And I was there for a couple of years. And for many, a very different experience that I won't go into for sake of time right now. But I found that if I want to make changes in my life in the way that I need to, I can't do it here. It's too
Mhm.
ingrained in me what I'm already doing here. And so it's time to make a shift. And I have found that going to a new environment has been really beneficial for me in many different times of my life. So it's interesting that you've had a similar experience.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about how, like, for you, you needed to leave San Diego. For me, I needed to go to San Diego. And I think there's probably people who moved to Seattle in order to, people are like, oh, Seattle has so much outdoor adventure and so many healthy things to do outside, but that just like wasn't the circle I was in when I lived there. So maybe it's just a matter of like sometimes when you want to make big changes in your life, like fully changing everything and changing the environment can sometimes be a good thing. But it is hard. I think it took me a solid 3 years to really feel like I had community in San Diego. And a lot of my friends in Seattle were people I had known since childhood, that we went to high school and college together. And I'll never really replicate those exact type of friendships, like people who knew me like as I was developing into a person. So there's still a handful of those people that I stay in connection with because I just think it's such a special bond that we have, that they knew me through all of these different chapters of my life. But I really love the community I found here in San Diego. It feels like very connected and open-minded and like very supportive of each other's growth and stuff. So I needed that change, but it did come with some grief of like letting go of some of these old connections and friendships that felt like almost like felt like siblings that needed to be released.
Absolutely. And I don't think that we have to completely let go of relationships as we are changing. The relationships
No.
can change with us, and that can be really beautiful. And there's definitely grief in relationships changing, but it can be for the better, and we can bring people with us even if it looks different.
Yeah.
And also, I think there is definitely something to be said for leaving a place and starting over when you're changing. But also, I think it's about finding the place and the energy that resonates with you at that time in your life. There's something different for everyone at different times. I often get the question, what is the difference between yoga and yoga therapy? And so I've thought about this a lot for myself, but I'm really curious how you differentiate between the two.
Yeah, that is sometimes a hard question and something that people definitely ask often. I see like I think what people think of stereotypically when they think of yoga is they think of asana, they think of yoga poses, they think of going to more of like a fitness class as being yoga. And to me, yoga therapy helps us get more to like the root of yoga as like a broader practice that encompasses not just our physical bodies, but also our mindset, the way that we breathe, the way that we interact with the world, even our interpersonal relationships, like being kind to others and, looking at like the yamas and niyamas, like how are we interacting with the world? How are we interacting with other people? And seeing it from that broader lens. Yoga therapy allows us to see it from that broader lens and then interact with people and work with people on those aspects of the practice that aren't just physical.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I completely agree. I always say to people, in yoga therapy, you will very rarely find me focusing just on asana, if asana at all. I
Mm-hmm.
barely do asana with when I'm doing yoga therapy, and it goes so much deeper than that. And I hope that people start to understand there's more to yoga than just asana.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's my main goal in my
Yeah.
sessions is to help people see that. And what I find often, I'm not sure about what you've seen in your yoga therapy practice and stuff, but for me, it's like I find that people just want to be seen and heard and have space held for them and be given permission to relax. I think
Mm.
that's like the number one thing that I find myself doing in my sessions. I've started to think of like maybe I should just call it like deep relaxation sessions, like because so much of what I do is just helping people like let go of some of the stress and anxiety of their life and come back to more of a sense of groundedness and self-assuredness within themselves. And that's all more so through meditation or through pranayama than it is through yoga poses.
Absolutely. That's one of the gifts that yoga has given me, and what I have to remind myself to come back to time and time again. I have to remember that it's about the grounding, it's about the coming back to center. And I'm always reminding others of that as well. When you look back on your journey with yoga and yoga therapy, what do you feel like is one of the biggest lessons you've learned?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned from yoga and yoga therapy is the importance of self-study and connecting with ourselves. That the answers to our problems don't usually lie in external things. They're usually already within us, and to tap into our own like intuition, listen to the little cues that our body and mind gives us, and like those more subtle things. That's probably been my biggest takeaway in my yoga practice, and something that I try to share with my clients. Like, how can we start to notice those little things? Because once we have awareness, then we can create change. But if we're not aware that our body hurts or that our mind is racing a million miles an hour, nothing's ever going to change. So tapping into that more subtle awareness and then seeing what we can learn from it has probably been the most beneficial thing for me.
I love that. And that's such a foundational piece of the work I do and what my business is built on. And I find you can't do that if you are constantly moving. Again, that brings us back to people getting so fixated on the asana and the physical practice. If we're just focused on that, we can't tune in and really notice what's going on within ourselves. And so having those other parts of the practice and other tools that bring us into stillness and silence and get to what's underneath, what's going on within us.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And when you're saying that too, it's also making me think of like, I feel like with everything, there is contradictions or opposites. And I
Mm-hmm.
think of like how for some people, they need to like move really fast and like push really hard in order to get to a place where they can relax. And I just want to normalize that for anyone that's listening that's like, wait, but like I can't sit and meditate. I don't like to do that. It's too boring or slow. That sometimes maybe we need those like moments where we go to a power yoga class or a hot yoga class from time to time and like get that energy out. And then at the end, we're able to drop into a deep shavasana. I think that's kind of like for people who tend to be more on that like high intensity, hypervigilance, like fast moving end of the spectrum in their day-to-day life, that sometimes getting out like a more of like a hard, like quote unquote, like a workout in first allows their body and mind to be ready for relaxation.
Yeah, that's so needed. And I know that because I've experienced that firsthand. I think part of it is the intention behind your practice.
Yeah.
I think what can be challenging is when people are just there for the workout and they're not open to what else that can unravel for them.
Yeah.
And just wanting a workout, which is fine and beautiful. And it's also an amazing workout. And you never know how long it will take for someone to get to the next step of their journey. So starting where you're at is perfect. But I think just being open to what could be underneath.
For sure. Yeah. And the intention behind the practice of like, I'm not on my mat to, I don't know, to be able to like burn calories or like do a handstand or something. That those things are not, they're not really yoga. Like, I mean, the handstand is yoga, the pose is yoga, but like just the attainment of a physical posture in order to be happy isn't the goal of yoga, or the attainment of like the more like superficial elements of a workout isn't really yoga. But like, are we going to the power yoga class in order to find maybe relaxation or take the edge off or become more aware of our bodies? That's a little different. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm saying. What led you to want to study yoga therapy and make the switch from focusing purely on the standard yoga practice?
So that's a perfect segue to what I just said, because when
Mm-hmm.
I first started my yoga journey, I was doing like hot power yoga. And one of the first studios I taught at, I was teaching hot yoga. And I got really tired of people asking me, like, how many calories am I burning in class? Or when am I going to be able to do the splits? Like I just was like, oh, I don't know how to answer these questions because that's not really why we're here. Like, I don't care how many calories you're burning. That doesn't matter. And I was just like feeling kind of burnt out of that like gym yoga environment. And I really wanted to teach yoga to people who would be receptive to the more subtle mental health and like psychological benefits of the practice, because those are what drew me in to doing yoga. And so at that time, I was kind of brainstorming like what populations, like where could I teach that would be more receptive to that, that wouldn't care so much about the physical and would just want to go more into the mental and emotional benefits. And I started working with veterans. I did a trauma-informed training with a company called Connected Warriors. And I worked for them for a little while in San Diego, teaching yoga to veterans through the VA. And that was a really awesome experience because these were mostly like veterans that were in their 60s, 70s, 80s. We were doing very simple yoga, sometimes just chair yoga. But in working with them, I was seeing how beneficial yoga was for them and how it helped kind of reduce some of the symptoms of their post-traumatic stress and help them get more connected in their bodies and feeling more secure in the present moment rather than just being stressed and super hyper vigilant. And around that same time, I met and started dating a firefighter who I'm now married to,
Mm.
and saw this crossover with like, okay, if these veterans that are older and have severe post-traumatic stress symptoms, if yoga is able to help them, why isn't my boyfriend and his friends and this younger generation learning these things as a proactive and preventative tool? And like some of the research actually has shown that people who have, I think it's in The Body Keeps the Score, that people who have a consistent meditation practice are less likely to develop post-traumatic stress symptoms because they're already in tune with how to process their thoughts and how to shift their focus, maybe noticing a flashback or a memory and being able to come back to the present moment and acknowledge that that is a reality of their past, but kind of logging it in the past. Meditation is helpful for that. So that kind of led me on this journey to teaching yoga to veterans and first responders. And then I did my 300-hour training with the Soul of Yoga and decided to just continue on and do the full yoga therapy training as well.
I have so much to say in response to this. I had a similar experience when I was first started teaching yoga pretty much full time. I was living in Hawaii and I was working at two yoga studios, and one was hot yoga, vinyasa, like power vinyasa flow. Everyone was very interested in doing all the things and wanted me to teach them how to do the handstands and wanted the room to be as hot as possible. And it was very easy to get swept up in all of that. And then the other studio I taught at was very much basically yoga therapy. And I got to experience firsthand the difference between the two modalities. And I just found myself wanting to go deeper and deeper and knowing at my core that there where my path was meant to lead. And that's when I looked into the soul of yoga and moved to San Diego. And when it comes to working with veterans and with PTSD, I mean, I love your realization that yoga needs to be used as a preventative and proactive tool. I think that that is, a white space in the market where we need to do it before the trauma happens. I love how it's being talked about more in regards to trauma and PTSD and nervous system regulation and healing all the things. But I think what needs to be talked about more is doing it before any of that happens, and how everyone can benefit from yoga and the how it can impact your life in such tangible ways without you really knowing what's going on, without you having that acute symptom yet.
I 110% agree. And I think it's sometimes so, it's sometimes frustrating that we live in a society that likes to just wait until shit has hit the fan before we do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So like we wait until people are in a crisis moment before we send them to therapy, rather than having therapy be something that is supporting them along every phase of their journey. And yoga therapy is the same. I think it's particularly difficult to teach somebody that's fully in like a crisis or full burnout, or fully like maybe they have a severe injury, whether it's physical or mental. And to once they're in that moment, it's harder to teach them these tools. It's possible and it still works, but it takes more time and dedication to push through and learn something new when you're just in survival mode. And there's a saying that I've learned through some of my work with military groups. It's a saying they use in the military, but I think it pertains to yoga actually really well too, which is you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training. And
Mm.
they use it in the military to talk about how they overtrain for skills so that when they're in like a crisis moment, their body just like naturally um, goes into doing whatever the skill is without them having to think about it. It becomes like second nature, and it becomes an automatic response because they've trained so much for it. And I've seen the same thing happen with like breath work, for example, where like I know that gentle breathing helps calm my nervous system. And when I feel my anxiety elevate, or I feel like I'm going to maybe have a panic attack, my body automatically now starts breathing more calm and more steady, because that's what I've trained it to do. Where if I looked at myself 10 years ago and I would start having a panic attack, I would very quickly go into like holding my breath or rapid, shallow breathing and just really overwhelmed really quickly. But because I've trained myself to breathe in that more grounded way on my yoga mat, feels more second nature, and it's easier to tap into when I'm in a crisis mode. And I think that anyone can learn these skills. Like we can learn how to breathe, we can learn how to listen to our body, we can learn how to allow ourselves to feel and sense emotions. But if we're like fully already in a panic attack and someone comes over and is like, try this new breathing practice, like most people are just gonna like slap them away and be like, no, like not feeling it. So we have to definitely try to promote using these tools as a proactive approach. Like I wish I learned this in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
It would have saved me so much hassle. So I think it's really cool in the work I'm doing with first responders that like I work at the Cal Fire Training Center, so that the firefighters that are being promoted into supervisor roles as engineers receive this yoga training as part of their firefighter training.
Mm.
And I hope to see more organizations like that adapt this, and maybe even in schools or in other industries too, other than just first responders.
That's amazing. And I really could not agree more. I think that, people seek out this kind of support or find this kind of spiritual practice when they're at their rock bottom. And yes, sometimes we do need to go through all of that to as part of our path and to come to this new chapter. But if our society believed in the importance of a regulated nervous system, a deep understanding of ourselves, like calm, grounded presence, it and put that into our learning when we are kids, it could change so much for so many people. And I wish that that was a priority, and I wish that we schools recognized how much we all need that, because we do live in a crisis society. And also I think it speaks to the fact that people believe they need to be struggling and working really hard, and this inability to let ourselves be grounded and let ourselves
Mhm.
be calm. I know that that's something I talk to people about a lot. So there's a lot of barriers to entry when it comes to yoga, but it's so important. And I also agree with what you were saying regarding we can't it's so hard to implement these skills when you are in the midst of crisis and panic. You have to practice it when you are at a grounded state or a less elevated state. And this is, again, something I talk about a lot and I'm so passionate about, because when you want it to be that trained response, just like you were saying. You want it to be the thing that you have already practiced and you can come back to and you know how to utilize when you're struggling. And so that's why you have to meditate. You have to build up the practice. You have to build up that strength. And you have to realize the importance. And I think it's hard for people to understand the importance when they haven't been taught it from a young
Yeah.
age. So when you're working with the firefighters and with first responders and all the work you've done, do people take on to it easily? Are they excited about it? Do they recognize the importance, or is it hard for them to come around to that?
That fluctuates for
Mhm.
sure. Um, there's a saying for firefighters where they say 250 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. Basically, that like the fire service has been around for 250 years and they're very resistant to change and very resistant to anything different coming into
Mm.
their sphere. So that's like a stereotype of firefighters, that they're a little closed off to new things. But I haven't actually found that to be the case. I have found that yoga and yoga therapy has been very well received, more so than I could have imagined. There are definitely still occasionally people who like I'll show up to teach a class and they'll be like, I don't do yoga. And they'll like go on a walk or do something else instead. So there's occasionally those people are a little bit of a Grinch for yoga. But for the most part, I think people are really receptive to it. And they all especially love like the yoga nidra or eye rest or like deep relaxation practices where they're like, oh, like, are we going to take a nap today? Like, can we just rest? They get really stoked about that. So, um, I, yeah, I think that they're more receptive than you would imagine.
Because I think secretly everyone wants it. Everyone wants what yoga can give them, and maybe there's shame or blocks or trauma that is prohibiting that for them, but everyone really does want the secret magic that yoga can give them.
For sure. For sure. And we talked a lot already about like the groundedness and like the calm that yoga can bring. But I also want to talk for a second about the ability to sit with difficult emotions that yoga gives space for also, because that's been something that has surprisingly come up for me, even in my work with firefighters and first responders, where one of the first times I taught to a group of firefighters, after they were kind of leaving the room and I was cleaning up, one of them hung back and came over to me and was like, hey, like at the end of class there, I started tearing up. Like I started kind of crying. Like, what was that about? And I was like, oh, that happens sometimes. Like all the time, emotion comes up on our mat. And at first, I thought he was uncomfortable with it. But then after I talked to him for a second, he was like, no, like, how can I feel that more often? Like, I don't let myself feel like that ever. Like, where did that come from? And he started talking to me about just like how much he misses his wife and his daughter and how he's been away at this training center for weeks. And it was this really beautiful moment that when he was able to allow himself to slow down, some of those emotions were able to rise to the surface and move through him. And whether it's sadness or grief or anger, or even sometimes like in a yoga nidra practice, some of the first responders I've worked with will have like a little bit of a trauma flashback where they'll start daydreaming and their mind will go to something difficult and it'll kind of freak them out for a second. But I like to reassure them that like on your yoga mat is a good place to work through these things because you are in a somewhat controlled environment. You have someone there holding space for you. It's a good time to let that thing come up, notice it, and then also come back to like, okay, and I'm laying here and I'm breathing and it's a new day and looking towards the future too of like, okay, that, yeah, that happened. And I can sit with it, and I can also start to make new memories in the present.
Yes. It's like that book you referenced earlier, The Body Keeps the Score. No matter if we're not feeling the emotions, they don't just go away. Our body is storing them. And as we move, this is one reason why physical postures are so important, because as we move our body through these postures, that energy is released and it can bring up a lot of emotion. And that can be wildly uncomfortable, especially if you're not used to feeling those emotions. And it will be uncomfortable at first, and you might feel scared or nervous, or you might want to push it away, but reminding yourself that you are safe to let yourself feel it. And the more you do let it come up and through, that's where the healing happens. And also you'll be able to process it more quickly and more easily, and be able to feel it more easily in your everyday life too.
Yeah, 100%. Um, yeah, and this is making me think of, I would love to maybe hear your thoughts on this too, but I had somebody I worked with this week, this man who was saying that he just has like so much anger, and he was never taught that it was okay to be angry. Like he feels like because he's like a big tall guy and kind of has like facial hair and a beard and looks kind of intimidating, that if he expresses his anger, it's going to scare people. And then he's at risk of getting in trouble for being angry because, like, almost like it almost seemed to me like he's almost afraid of like being arrested or getting in trouble or something because of his anger. And we talked about like, actually in the session, I had him just like scream and yell like at an inanimate object. He was like, I was like, it's okay to just scream and let it out. And he was like, I don't want to scare you. It's like, it's not going to scare me. Just like direct it at the chair, not at me. But after he did that, and he like, we kind of like did like a practice of like shaking and moving the body and like whatever, he was like so relieved, so relieved. And I think that our culture here in the US, especially, but all around the world probably, it's like we shy away from expressions of intense emotions, and we find them kind of scary. We feel like we have to suppress them or hide them. And our movement practice can also be a place where it's okay to feel anger, sadness, grief, despair, frustration, whatever, and allow those things to be okay too. It doesn't need to be all just like peace and butterflies. Like life is also hard sometimes, you know?
I do. I absolutely do.
Yeah.
And this, I can relate to that story you just shared in a lot of ways, because anger has always been the hardest emotion for me to feel, and I never thought it was okay. I always pushed it away. And for me, it was different reasoning than the client that you were sharing. For me, it was more like I'm supposed to be always be put together and calm and grounded. I can't express my anger. It'll be too much. It will change people's opinions about me. But I had this anger within me and I had to let it out. And my yoga practice did help me do that. And screaming and, you know, punching a pillow. And it's so important to let ourselves feel these emotions. And I was taught mostly inadvertently that it's not okay to show those emotions, again, because our culture, our society just uh, tells us that. And it's about finding safe and helpful ways to release those emotions, and also to understand them, bringing it back to what we were talking about in the beginning, having that self understanding and that self awareness of where are these emotions coming from? What's the root of this emotion? And yoga can help us work through all different aspects of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you talked about punching a pillow too. That's one of my personal favorites and something I like to share with other people. And I think especially for men, because there's this like stereotypical, it's normalized for like men to get in fights or
Mm,
to like punch things. And it's not a healthy expression of anger. Even if you're like punching a tree or something, like you're going to hurt your hand, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting it, if it's a public display of this anger, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting the people around you. It's not the vibe that we want to go for. But if you can take that if you can take that feeling and allow yourself to express it in a safe way, like in the privacy of your home, like screaming and punching your pillow or your bed, awesome. Like
Mm-hmm.
do it and do it without feeling ashamed of it. I think people are, um, even when I don't know about you, but I feel like even for me, sometimes even if I'm alone, I feel like a little bit of this sense of insecurity or like, oh my gosh, what if my neighbor hears me? Or what if like somebody thinks I'm just crazy or whatever? But it's just like this.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just need like 30 seconds to just let it all flow out. And then it feels so much better afterwards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even when I'm by myself, I felt that shame and like it wasn't okay. And, but there's such a sense of relief now of letting myself feel the emotions that I need to feel and knowing how to handle them. And also knowing that I have the tools and I have the capacity to hold all my emotions and to show up for myself in whatever way I need to. And yoga has given me that. So this is related to what we were just talking about around shame. What is something that you used to feel shame around that you've learned to love or accept about yourself?
For me, that's a hard emotion to even bring up memories of because I
Mm,
think that when I feel ashamed, I like try not to. I think I'm just like, put that up to the side.
mm,
I don't feel that. What are you talking about, shame? I don't have that. Um, but no, like it's definitely there. I think that when we're talking about expressing emotions or expressing ourselves, and also how we started this conversation talking about like the stereotype of a yoga teacher being perfectly put together. I think I sometimes have felt shame around the moments where I have reacted to something or I have kind of gone into my more like fierce, assertive side. And
mm,
then later I feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm not who people think I am. Like I'm not this perfectly calm, grounded person. Like I just got really angry at somebody, or I just was told that I was too confrontational and now I'm a bad person or something, like I feel shame around that. And that's something that's been a personal growth journey for me because I grew up in a very reactive household where like both of my parents are very opinionated and intense and like my family comes from the East Coast and like just like my dad's side is Italian, my mom's side is like from Boston. Everyone is loud, everyone says what they're thinking. And through my mindfulness practice, I've had to learn to not always just say the first thing that comes to my mind. But when I do have those like human reactions, I feel ashamed of them sometimes. It's like finding that boundary of like, okay, what do I need to give myself grace for because I'm a human? Or when am I standing up for myself? And maybe that fierceness is actually a really good and healthy thing that I shouldn't be ashamed of, that I shouldn't push aside because, especially as a young woman, we're told to kind of just be quiet. And I think when I'm assertive, sometimes it surprises people. And then also, like, when is it a reaction that doesn't serve me? When is that actually like not really in line with my true self and who I want to be and how I want to show up? And can I just like apologize and move on if something is taken the wrong way, you know?
exactly. It's both. It's both, definitely.
Yeah.
And I have had very similar experiences where sometimes I have a strong reaction and people can be surprised by that because to some people I can come off quiet, especially at first. And so that did cause me to get even quieter and shut myself down because I didn't want people to see me differently or react in that way. And then I realized sometimes it's appropriate for me to respond that way. And it also doesn't mean that it's confrontational in a bad way. It's just how my energy is needing to be expressed. I think it comes back to letting ourselves be more than one thing and
Yeah.
show up as more than one thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like being able to show up as a multifaceted human. And there are definitely circumstances where being fierce and assertive is such a strength. And even in yoga, right? We have like Kali, who's just
Yes.
like the embodiment of that, like fierce and strong and ready to like cut your head off if you mess with her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that energy is also sacred. It doesn't need to be something that we're ashamed of.
We talked a lot about in the beginning about that self-awareness and self-understanding that yoga brings to us. What does that look like for you? What does your connection to your intuition look like? How does it show up for you? How do you connect to it and strengthen it? And how have you grown to learn about it?
Hmm. I think that the way that I have learned to connect with my intuition for me is about getting out of my head. I feel like there are like we have like these different energy centers within us. And without getting too woo woo, I think that like the head is like our thoughts are like constantly analyzing and judging and thinking and critiquing and planning. And for me, my mind can sometimes get the best of me. Like if I attach too much with my thinking mind, I am not in connection with my intuition anymore. But if I can like drop down more into like my gut instinct, then I feel like I can make choices and decisions from a more grounded place. So when I'm connected to my intuition, I feel like I'm able to listen to like, what do I really want? Not what does someone else expect of me, not what would other people think I would do, or what does society think I should do? What path should I take? But really dropping into like, what do I want without the external circumstances? To me, that's what I'm learning when I'm connecting to myself. What do I need? What does my body need? What is my body telling me? And it helps me make better choices. And I think it helps guide me towards my purpose and where I'm supposed to go, more so than if I get caught up in my head about things.
Well, I love that. And I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but it a part of human design shares about how your intuition speaks to you and you're an emotional authority, which means that your emotions tell you a lot about how you're feeling and basically just how we have to get out of our head and stop intellectualizing and stop trying to figure things out and make the rational decision that we think makes sense and really get in tune with what our body and our emotions are trying to tell us.
Yes.
And the other part of the question was around how you develop that connection. If you have a practice or a ritual or a way that you speak to and your intuition speaks to you.
Mm. I think for me, it's through writing, like journaling and writing, just like stream of consciousness writing without um, thinking about what I'm going to write, just putting the pen to the paper and just letting things flow out. That helps me process my emotions. And that also helps me see clearer patterns of like how I'm sorting through what's there without analyzing it, just like letting it come out. And then also going to therapy myself and working with other mentors and people who can help me self-reflect and guide deeper self-inquiry questions for me. That I don't think this is necessarily something that we do alone. I think having other supportive people in our lives, whether it's a therapist or a coach or a mentor or a friend, that can help us see our blind spots, that is really helpful too.
I could not agree more. One, I also use journaling in that way, and I think it's so powerful. And two, I think that we absolutely cannot do it on our own, and having that external support in the right way is needed if we want to get to that certain level of deep self understanding, deep self connection, and being able to embody that in the world. We need help from other people and we need that connection. And that actually, you shared with me right before we started recording that you are going to graduate school for psychology. And so I'm curious what what initiated you to make that decision and to take that step?
Very similar to my yoga path. I think it was a natural progression from yoga therapy because as I've worked with clients over the last 4 years or so, I want to be able to support them in a different way with their mental health journey.
Mm-hmm.
That I know that having that credential of being like a licensed therapist will help me support them. And I still plan to integrate yoga therapy into everything I do. And I also hope that with receiving, uh, with receiving my master's degree and this more like traditional credential, that it will help people understand what I do more. Because especially in my work with the fire department, I would love to, my long-term goal, and I'm just going to say it out there because I've been telling people for years already, the fire chief already knows this is what I want. But
Yes.
I want to be able to be a clinician for the fire department
Mm.
or to work in a greater scale, like with them. And I would love to be able to do that as a yoga therapist. But just due to the structures of the world and government organizations like fire departments, they like people to have traditional credentials in order to hire them for jobs like this. So I hope that by receiving this credential, it will help me work towards getting more of like a full-time position doing this type of work for something like a fire department, rather than as a yoga therapist and working as a private contractor. I just don't have the job security that I would like.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I'm very excited for you. It seems like the perfect path for you, and it definitely makes sense for your trajectory and everything you're interested in doing. And I'm so excited for you to work even more fully with the fire department. I think
Yeah.
it's so needed.
Yeah, I love it. And even like I guess something else I want to add to that too is it's like on one hand it is that I want to have this more recognized credential. That's part of it. And then the other part of it is I'm really enjoying learning about psychology. Like I'm taking one class right now as a prereq for the master's program. And as part of the master's program, they sent me a book to read before I start. And I'm just like soaking up the information like a sponge. Like I love learning about it. And now in the back of my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to just study this forever? Like maybe I'll get my PhD someday. Maybe I'll do this. Like I love learning and it's so fun to learn about something that I'm actually curious about. It feels so much more intriguing than when I was in my undergrad and just learning about, I don't know, whatever the random things that the classes you have to take in order to graduate, in high school and like early years of college. It's so boring because you're just forced to do it. But
Hmm.
now I'm able to like dive into something that I'm genuinely interested in. And I'm more of like a mature adult now that wants to learn rather than wants to just go to college and party with my friends. So I think that this process of learning now in my 30s is just going to be so much more enriching than when I was in school as like a 19-year-old.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it still always will boggle my mind that we're expected to be studying and know what we want to do when we're 18. Like, it just makes no sense. And
Yeah.
also going back to human design, you have a one in your profile, which means, and the one is the researcher, and it's just like this unquenchable thirst for knowledge in what you love and are interested in. And so, and I have a one in my profile too, so I understand it. And uh, yeah, I think I'm just really excited for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It'll be a good journey.
Yeah. Okay. Another question I have is, what is something you wish people talked about more, or that you wish you were able to talk about more? And I feel like I might know what you're going to say, but I would love to hear your answer.
Oh, I'm curious what you think I'm gonna say, but based on our conversation, something I wish people talked about more is how they really feel.
Mm,
Like, how are you really feeling? And like normalizing that and allowing your friends to talk about how they really feel. That's something that, as somebody, like for me, it's like as my job, I hold space for other people all the time. So it's also really valuable for me to have friends around me that are okay with me expressing how I really feel, even when it's a difficult thing. And normalizing other people's reactions and responses to the things that they're going through I think that would make the world a better place if we can all have less shame about our true feelings and more openness about the things that we're going through so that we don't have to go through them alone.
Yes. Yes. I could not agree more. I'm I'm very passionate about that as well. And I do think that surrounding yourself with people who encourage that from you and who are open to that is so crucial. So, living intuitively wild means living dedicated to your true, authentic self, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
Mm. Yeah, authenticity is like a very core value of mine. And that comes back to community for me too. Surrounding yourself by people who have the capacity to hold space for your authentic expression is really valuable to me. So showing up in spaces where I can be fully 100% myself in all of my multifaceted personality, um, and be celebrated for that. Not showing up in spaces where, like, there are certain spaces, maybe sometimes for people, it's like work or around certain family members where you might hold back parts of who you are because it's safer to do so. And I think that's okay to do. But to make sure that there are places and people in your life that you can just be 100% truly, authentically yourself. Um, where, sometimes I can be a yoga teacher, sometimes I can go and fire spin and do acro yoga. Sometimes I can be an outdoorsy dirt bag in the desert rock climbing. And then other days I want to have like a fancy spa day and a fancy dinner. And like all of those are me. I don't have to just be one. And I want friends and people around me who also have those same values.
Yeah, that's something I wish for everyone to find that community where they feel like they can be all of themselves. And if anything, just to find that one person who they can show up exactly as they are.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Kendall, please share with everyone where they can connect with you, any offerings you have, all the things.
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at Kendall Ann Yoga, and it's Ann with an E. It's my middle name. So Kendall Ann Yoga. My website is kendallann.com. And I also have some recordings on YouTube and on Insight Timer, which is a free meditation app. Those are also under Kendall Ann Yoga. And then if you're based in San Diego, I'm not sure when this podcast airs, but I'm going to be teaching a nervous system regulation workshop at Mesa Rim Rock Climbing Gym later this month on Sunday, May 19th. And if you're listening to this after that, if you're based in San Diego, you can come take public yoga classes with me at Mesa Rim, or schedule private sessions with me via my website.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Kendall.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was good to chat with you.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.